She's getting a golden retriever, and she approached me, and I recommended a breeder, and they hooked up, and I think.
Where did you find it? Where did you find it?
Oh, is that yours?
Yeah.
North Carolina. No, it's well, I'm happy for it. I'm fine. Yeah, I love it for one. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah, that's what I was worried about.
I knew you would be.
I love your outfit. You look very chic.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Have you been to the rodeo, Marion?
No, not this year. No, I have. Yeah. I love cold. Okay.
One of my I know. Do you want to wait on Don? Okay.
Let me tell you, in that, my Bible said teachers are given honor of your kitty. Yeah, so I just want to know. It's coming down the pipeline. I'm fine, thank you. How are you? Good. Yes. Right. Yeah. I know. Oh, wow. I had some coworkers. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, my God.
I don't think.
I don't know how you guys can make decisions. You know, that would be so hard for me. You know, to walk and say, well, my cousin has this. I have friends that do it. I mean, they still are. And there's so many. Just not. There are. Yeah. Oh, thanks.
Are you beginning to wonder what we're gonna do if you didn't show up? Let's go to the next shot.
We're just gonna. There's so many. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
And just so y'all know, solely the capacity for the other portion of the other portion of the presentation is still in line with we wanted y'all to have this in the handout. So it's
Great.
Hi. That's good. Afternoon.
And
Like,
well,
quickly the day has gone.
yeah, but you can't tell the age, I guess. As long as I'm breathing and smoking.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. At this time, we'll begin with item number 3, public comment. Were there any written comments submitted?
No, sir.
anybody of conflict of. At this time, we'll close public comment and move to item number 3, fact finding and recommendations. Item A, consideration of an action on a recommendation for procedure and policies impacting animal shelter capacity at the Animal Services Division. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Phelps.
One. So in our previous meeting, we discussed animal and care numbers for 2021 last year. Their service levels required by state law. What we're required to do as an animal shelter and animal control. Reporting versus our recommended capacity numbers, those which were reported to the state, and then those which were recommended by us as well. We had some discussions for our capacity for care, what that meant, those definitions, how that impacts both the animals and the staff, and then discussions on maintaining that capacity. As we move forward into the busiest times, we want to make a discussion and get board recommendation on some of our processes and procedures. Requested some information, our organizational chart. We have 10 full-time and 3 part-time employees. Animal services manager. We have an administrative coordinator that handles a lot of the paperwork, financials, things like that. Veterinary technician, 1 field supervisor, 4 animal service officers when fully staffed, supervisor, 1 full-time kennel technician, and 3 part-time kennel technicians with limited hours. So when you say part-time, only 999 hours for the entire year. There's no staff specifically dedicated to the foster program, rescue coordination, social media, volunteer coordination, onboarding, behavioral training, or pilot TMR project. Those things are absorbed by the leadership organization, which we include the supervisor, the veterinary technician, shelter supervisor, myself, and some. You also asked for recommendations on focus on our capacity. So we want to focus on our available kennels, our cages, and space instead of the number of animals, because the number of animals can change depending on how many are housed in a particular enclosure. So we wanted to talk about the number of actual enclosures and space that we currently have. For dogs, 39. Those are the built-in kennels, which are 24. Temporary enclosures of rooms and hallways at 11. That's our recommendation. That's looking at being at our top capacity. That would be above 100%. Staying in rooms or hallways, we're talking about the side rooms and different ones. We put a limited number of animals in each of those, and something that's about 4 feet by 4 feet. Only fit about 3 places. For cats, we have our cat cages, which are stainless steel. They vary in size, and each of them has a portal so they can go to the other side in order to use the restroom and have another side where they can sleep. And counting those, we have 51. Plus, we have 24, which were found to be damaged, missing parts, not able to properly disinfect due to the design, have a plastic texture in the interior of.
Sorry, it's not picking up your voice.
I'm sorry. Okay.
So we're gonna do this a little bit, but then if you don't mind pushing the podium back this way a little bit. It's just not, it's not hearing you whenever you're looking at the.
Okay. There. Due to the design of it being plastic and having texture, with the cleaning supplies, it's also made of wood. So a lot of those things start to decay, and a lot of microbes and things and contagions are consistently kind of living in those little cracks and crannies. So we're looking at those 24 to replace, repair at some point in the future, but currently it would be at 51. We won't have any long-term use of temporary cages. So it would be size appropriate if we do have to use any temporary housing in the event we have an animal that comes in that day and we need to figure out where we need to put them, or they're going out to foster or something like that. It would be size appropriate for the animals or the group of animals. Questions? Yes.
So for the cats, are those 51 just in the cat adopt room, or does that include ISO and?
That includes all available cages.
Does that also include PetSmart, or is that something?
Oh, no, does not include PetSmart. We have,
So we don't need that at all, other than showing the animals, is that correct?
they stay there permanently. So there's about 6 cages there. Yes, so that would be included, but we're talking about just at the shelter. Any cats that are PetSmart would end up staying
That's
there.
also part of the show.
Agreed.
We see the same cats.
Yes. So now we're talking at a threshold for decisions. And say threshold for decisions, we're talking about once we reach a level of capacity, what are our decisions for euthanasia? When all of our options are exhausted, we use our transfers and other rescues. We have done our requests and asked for fostering, adoption efforts, social media, events, depending on staffing and volunteer participation. So once we've exhausted all of these options, we want to talk about how we actually make those decisions and what comes into those decisions. So the first part is about triage. This isn't really about the decision. This is where we get to the point where we make those decisions. So this is just our daily workings. An animal comes in, where are we going with that? And what we do? So we wanted to talk through that first before we get to talking about you as the board and what we're looking at in these statements. So an animal comes in on day 1 as a stray and intake. And one of the big things, the first 2 things we need to determine with this animal is whether it's healthy or it's unhealthy. Because that's going to determine the type of treatment, how long it's going to be unavailable to the public, the amount of resources that we have to use, all of these things. Following whether it's healthy or unhealthy, if we do find that it is unhealthy, we have to determine if that health is based on something that is contagious. And if it is something that is considered contagious, then we're looking at the cost, time required in precautionary measures. Many of these are highly contagious diseases and viruses, which if left in a shelter and transmitted can affect the entire population very, very rapidly. Many of these, for instance, panleukopenia, parvo, distemper, and ringworm are based on very minimal contact, and it can be passed either through contact from the people cleaning, from the bedding, from pretty much anything that touches them, and it's highly contagious and easily caught. So we want to determine whether these animals are contagious or not, and then that will render our decisions as well. Also on intake, yes.
We know a cost per disease. I know we'll talk about that later. That those contagious diseases that you're listed there. Do you know an average cost of treatment per animal?
An average cost per treatment, well, that depends. It does depend on the severity. In some of these are not treatable, and it's usually prolonged and inevitable, especially in a shelter environment with a large number of animals. Even if you were to treat it, you would not want it anywhere near any animals in your thing. For instance, panleukopenia is a highly contagious virus for kittens. The treatment is generally 50-50. And if you're treating it, you have to treat it elsewhere. And so doing, you could go up to 1,000, depending on what level of treatment you wanted to do. Catheters, fluids, multiple drugs, overnight in the ER. There's a lot of ways that you can go, but from our resource standpoint, for the safety of the other animals, those would be something that we would look at not being able to do. And if we did, we would be looking for a rescue or a specialty group that specifically handles that particular disease. I do know that Pearland has that handles the parvo pups, and we would reach out. This is not an immediate thing. We would reach out, again, in the previous slide, reach out to rescues, organizations that would be able to. But because, keep in mind, there's so few of those, it's more no's than yeses on those because they fill up very quickly. But we would make that effort as well. On intake, we will also do an initial behavior assessment. And that is, are they too aggressive to handle? We have to look at our safety, the safety of the staff, safety of the other animals. And then we also will do a fear anxiety score. And I have that, each of you has one of these. I won't go into detail into each level, but we're going to talk kind of about what that means. So this just gives everybody a baseline to determine the level that an animal is when it's progressing through different levels of aggression, fear, anxiety, which can cause them to redirect, cause other destructive behavior and things like that. So when we're talking about that, there's one for dogs and one for cats. This one gives you a really good summary. This came from fearfree.org. So this is the organization that really believes in fear-free use and assessing the animals appropriately. So you have different levels, green, yellow, and red, and it goes from a score of 0 or 1 all the way up to 5. The 1s, the 2s, and the 3s are the ones that you see that usually they need some time. 1s and 2s, they're happy, loving, they're coming up to you, wanting hugs, kisses, they're everybody's best friend. The 2, probably, and usually you see the 2 is usually someone who is an owned animal that's been given up by the owner. They're seeking attention from that owner, someone they trust, and are displaying a little bit more fear from anyone else or the environment. Number 3, similar to number 2, but it's more avoidance. They're not going to eat. They're going to turn their head away. They're not really going to take treats from you very well. They're not going to interact. They're avoiding a lot of things. So these are animals that have either shut down because of the change of environment, or they're not sure of who to trust and things like that. These are all things where we talk about a 24-hour calm down or 48 hours, or let's give them a calm room. Let's give them some time to get used to the environment that's new for them. And then we progress into a 4 or a 5. A 4 means that they're starting to react outwardly to things. It's no longer things that they're internalizing where they're just going to kind of shut down. Now they're going to start showing a lot more signs that they are getting to a point where they may become reactive. Fight or flight, they're freezing up, they're not moving, they're backing into the corner, they're slunking, their ears are back. We call it whale eyes when they're kind of staring. They're giving you all the warning signs before they reach to a 5, which is the other part of flight or fight, which is the fight, which is aggression. And that can be redirected. It can be in defense, provoked or unprovoked, but it gets to a level where they will try to harm someone. So these are the levels that we would do a fear assessment score initially with the animal, just to see where the baseline is and to see if there's any progression during the stray. Keep in mind, these are animals that have just arrived to the shelter, and this is on day 1. We have the same thing for cats, same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As well, where we're assessing the cats as well and giving them the opportunity for 3 or below to kind of have a chance to calm down period, get used to their environment, and day 3 or 5, day 3 or 5, the stray hold is done. Any of our animals that come in as strays are held for either 3 days or up to 5 days. 3 days if they're unowned, we don't have any identification. 5 days if they are owned or we have some type of identification and we're still trying to find the owner or reunite them. So after 5 days, there's a secondary assessment completed at the end of the stray hold to see if there are any changes. Behavioral for cats and a fear anxiety of 5 results in euthanasia. A score of 4 leads to additional assessment. For dogs, same thing, fear anxiety score of 5 results in euthanasia. Score 4 leads to use of medications. There's some medications we can use for dogs. A couple, it's called a chill protocol. Usually it's used whenever they're visiting clinics, but we'll try to use that for a limited amount of time and do a weekly reassessment for effectiveness and work with the behavioralists depending on availability.
Don, did they not have the same medication for cats that they do for dogs?
They do not. They just don't exist. Ones, and some of the ones that are used for dogs are off-label. They were used in humans and they were found to be effective in dogs.
So in the context that we've been talking about TNR, are we saying here that if we pick up a cat who has never had a home, who is feral and shows level 5 signs of behavior, that cat is likely going to be euthanized?
Yes. Okay, there we go. Or any other questions? So that's during the stray hold. Once if they've passed all of those things, they're either found to be healthy, they're found to be treatable, an upper respiratory infection, they have bad skin, some cuts and bruises, different things like that. Then we go into our triage and our tiered approach. And that's dependent on available space. Won't be specific to the number of animals. Again, a litter of kittens, a litter of puppies, 2 dogs, brother and sister come in together, they'll be housed together, and that would be considered one enclosure, and we will do our best to kind of keep them together in that manner, because they only need one space. The triage differs for new intakes versus existing shelter residents because our new intakes have already gotten here. We have not used a lot of resources for them. We're going to make some determinations on them if we are at or above capacity, as opposed to the ones that are already here. We've invested the resources and we've invested the emotional attachments to them. So some decision points apply to both. So we'll go through these and let me know if you have any questions. And you should have those in front of you in case you're unable to see the board or the screen. Operational impacts at 100%. If we are at 100% capacity, and we look at our numbers and we find that we have reached our capacity for today and the new animals come in, well, we need to determine what we're going to do with our current population. There's no available space for animals to decompress. There are no calm down rooms because we have used all of our rooms. Lack of ability to segregate contagious animals from healthy. We won't have that particular space because we have used all of our areas. Increased potential for spread of parasites and diseases, and future animals will be placed in subpar temporary conditions for housing. As we go through these different percentage levels, there's going to be different determinations based upon those percentages at 100%. 10, 120, 140, 150. So there's different decision levels to those. As we go through those, when I get to the different ones, we're taking this 100% and we're adding those to operational impacts to the others. But I didn't want the print to keep getting small. So it's a cumulative thing for all of these impacts. At 100%, for strays that are on stray hold at the end of their stray hold, and they've been reassessed. If their behavior is at a 4, for cats or for dogs, if they have ringworm systemically all over, not just a couple of spots, if they are heartworm positive, or they have heavy sarcoptic mange all over, FIV or FELV, we give them 3 days to identify a rescue. So we will reach out to those specific rescues that do that. I believe there's some in Austin that would take some of these types of cats. Those animals would be at 100%, and until we get back down to 100%. In care, those are ones that are currently with us. They're already in our care, and they have made it past the stray hold. The only one we'd be looking at with cats would be anything that's FIV or FELV positive, and give them that 5 days to identify and rescue them. For both of them, if we have any animals that have upper respiratory that we've been treating, and they are still infected and not showing signs of improvement after the 14 days. Generally, a treatment for upper respiratory is a minimum of 14 days for the antibiotics, but a lot of the upper respiratory infections are also viral, and with viral infections, they just run their course. So we're looking at a lot of things to determine whether they're getting better or whether they're getting worse at that time. Questions? 110%. And that may mean we're at 100% tomorrow, we're at 110 following day, and it's cumulative. Then we add on increased anxiety, aggression between animals beginning to display, redirection from stress of too many animals in proximity becomes a risk. Reduced time for volunteers and staff to interact and enrich. The more animals you have, the less time you can spend with those animals. And increased length of time between animal enclosures being closed as well. And then at 110%, these things would occur. Anything you see in italics is something that we've moved to a different group, or we've changed the determination. For instance, for strays, originally it was just systemic ringworm. We would also add in focal, meaning if it's just different spots of ringworm in different places. FIV, FELV, sarcoptic mange, and that's the contagious type of mange. Heartworm positive and sarcoptic mange. If they are currently in our care, FIV and FELV will give them 3 days to identify a rescue. Sarcoptic mange if it's very heavy. Heartworm positive untreated. So if they were already in our care, we have not sent them off to receive their injections for their heartworm treatment. Those would also be ones we would look at as well, along with sarcoptic mange. For both upper respiratory and for both behavior and fluid. Operational impacts of 125%, lack of room to maintain appropriate safe distance between animals, no ability to separate new intake from current healthy herd, increased potential for contamination and contagion between animals and fomites. And fomites is a fancy word to say objects or materials which are likely to carry infections, such as clothes, bedding, and furniture. So if we're packing them in and if we have too many animals, too many enclosures, and temporary spaces, then we have a much higher potential for all of the things that we're touching and using to pass on those contagious to other animals. And also with them all being in close proximity, the stress level goes up, and so there's a lot of reactivity. At 125% for cats that are strays, behaviors of 3 or 4, ringworm, focal, and systemic infections, heartworm positive, ringworm, focal, and systemic. In care, behavior of 4, ringworm systemic all over, heartworm positive, untreated, and ringworm systemic. For both, at 125%, it would be FIV, FELV, URI, any URI, upper respiratory infections, any sarcoptic mange, or chronic unknown diseases, kidney failure, liver failure. Yes.
And talking about this capacity, which capacity?
That would be the number that we mentioned earlier before this. No, the number of enclosures that we listed, right? Is it on your?
So again, it's not a specific number because there could be an enclosure that has multiple dogs in it. And so
Right.
that's why we didn't want to tie it to 50 dogs, 60 dogs. So
Yeah.
it's based on the enclosures, and so it could be that it's 21 day, could be 25 the next day, but we're still at 100%. We haven't hit any of these. So it's strictly on enclosures and spaces to house.
At one point, we talked about sort of this ideal number.
Mhm.
I'm assuming we weren't starting this after.
Oh, no, like our ideal best case golden day that we celebrate number, no. No, we took into the factor that just regular but running a business with the assumption that as a shelter, we would always be, never get to that golden standard unless the shelter had some type of that. This is just normal working capacity.
Yeah, like if you look at the operational impacts at 100%, so that's no available space because we've taken over like the calm down rooms. They've got temporary enclosures in them. So it's not just saying, oh, we're maintaining all of our rooms, we're using.
Space to.
Exactly. You wouldn't have a space to hey, come in, meet this animal, things like that, or pregnant mom comes in, needs a quiet space to have a puppy. We wouldn't have those spaces, so we would have to. Yeah.
Correct.
Operational impacts at 140%. Capacity for care declines to minimal interaction with animals. That means whenever we're at 100% or below, or even at 110, there's a lot more time and ability to provide more enrichment, take specific animals out that need a little more extra TLC. It's easier to report different illnesses or concerns that people are seeing with the animals. But when the number of animals increases to the point where you have to clean and that time is taken in, with the staffing, there's less ability to have eyes on the animals and interaction with them. Enrichment is reduced, cut to increase time to clean and care for the animals. The volunteers in our food enrichment and our walking, so we're not talking like cutting out that type of enrichment. We're talking about like the kind where, hey, let's take them out and let's let the puppies run around for a minute, or we got a little more time. This guy, likes to paint his kennel, so we're going to take him out and let him run around the yard for a bit, or take him for an extra walk, or let's take these cats out and try to introduce them together to see if they do well, in a bigger enclosure or things like that. We wouldn't have the time to do all of those different introductions and higher levels of enrichment. Increased potential for animal bites due to redirection, frustration, anxiety. Staff morale and mental health decline as lack of time to care for animals increases. At 140% capacity, we reach far past our maximum. For strays, we begin to include our seniors. When we say seniors, we're not looking at just a line of age, like, okay, it's 7 or above. We're talking about senior based on they're displaying the disease complexes of different seniors, arthritis, skin issues, the blood work is indicating that they are truly getting into their senior ages. If they're still spry and jumping on things, that would be one to consider. But you're looking at seniors that are actually in their senior time. Sleepover fails, 3 or more sleepover fails for aggressive or destructive behavior. We're not talking about puppies that chewed up all the socks. We're talking about any sleepover fails, and this is like sleepover fails where they have tried to attack all the dogs, or tried to eat the kittens and cats, or were so destructive that they came back the same day. And tried at least 3 times with 3 different types of families with them. Now, keep in mind, this is at 140%. This is not at the beginning of the morning at 100%. This is where we're progressing to where we're looking at different animal tests.
What do you have a feel, even if it's not like a calculated number, but do you have a feel for how many of the people who come in willing to adopt that are then willing to take on sarcoptic mange or any of these contagion type things that are, I know it's a very small number, I'm guessing.
Very few to none. Mostly a lot of times it's an education thing. Or they don't want to take that time. They're looking for kind of like a wrapped up in a bow kind of thing, a package. So anything with an illness that they have to treat or that requires veterinary bills, extra costs, or they're going to be at the vet paying $300 a month plus blood work and all of those things, then usually they're going to look for another animal or go to another shelter where they can find something that is healthy. Because it's kind of like going to buy a car and it's like, oh yeah, well the engine works sometimes. They just kind of keep looking. Now, there are people who understand medical issues, like, yeah, I'll take him to my vet tomorrow. Me too. Like, my dog is the most expensive thing in my house right now. Literally. My car is less expensive.
But there are some people that are okay with seniors,
Oh, yes.
especially if they're seniors.
Exactly. I love seniors. They're my favorite. So we would never, get to that point unless it's seniors where we've done blood work and we're talking about hospice care. At the end of their time. Behavior for any requiring behavior modification medicines, which means we've already put them on a chill protocol. It hasn't been working. They're still at a 4. They're still being destructive, still showing signs. And so if we get to 140, we've been working on that. Now those would be also any heartburn positives, upper respiratory, ringworm, sarcoptic mange, chronic unknown diseases, anything that's dog reactive, or one pet household kind of dogs that can't be with other dogs. A lot of that's, remember, we're at our, this is kind of our last one, because those are also dogs which tend to come back from sleepovers, even though people ask or say, oh, he's going to be the only dog in the household. They end up taking them to the dog park, introducing them to family dogs or family animals, and they don't do well with those. So those would be some we would consider at 140%. Operational impact at 150% or more. You would not have the opportunity to do any additional enrichment. Increased impact to budget for food and medications, and possible loss of staff due to burnout and compassion. And 150% strays. In care, a sleepover fails 3 or more, destructive to physical surroundings. And then we have this list here: behavior modification, heartworms, the same list as before, and also adding in seniors. So, any questions?
Does our foster, the new foster program that you created, does it ask people if they're willing to do the medical, to foster the medical?
Yes, and so with our foster application, which is starting to pick up a lot more steam and doing quite well, the first thing that we do is we make verbal, we call them immediately and talk to them about what they're looking for, what they're also doing. We have a very extensive application that's online. It's a lot longer than a lot that I've seen where it's 1 or 2 pages, where we ask them what kind of animals they're looking for, what kind do they want, what kind don't they want, which animals do they have in their homes, how many children, what age they are, what are they familiar with. So even some people say, I want a large dog. Well, what are you familiar with as far as taking a fostering? When you say I want medical, they're not familiar with anything, or they say behavior and they're not familiar with behavior. We want to go through all of those things and tell them all of those to get them the right fit. So that's been working really well, so that we have our veterinary technician or the supervisor calling them and having a long conversation, and then having them come to the shelter to pick out an animal and show them the ones that we kind of thought about would work for them. Not so much that they get to come and shop for their own animal that's cute. I want the cuddly one. We're not trying to send out 6-week-old puppies that are people get adopted tomorrow. We're talking about the ones that truly need it. And so those are the ones we're going to walk through and have a list that we show them and talk to them about. So with those, board recommendations on additional options to address capacity concerns once alternatives are exhausted. It's not an option to continue and take despite reduced capacity for care, health, and behavior concerns.
No.
Okay, so, yeah.
Are there any questions, comments, concerns on the different thresholds and options that John has gone over?
Right, is this a proposal or is this what we're actively doing?
It's a proposal.
Proposal. If we use this and went back a year, how many animals would we have?
That would be a hard thing to determine, because the software that we have does not track all of these things in a cohesive manner. We would have to look at and it'd be hard to determine, because sometimes it's based on behavior, if it's based on a medical thing, something that we would discuss as a group and determine. For instance, if they're a senior and they're having medical issues, we have to discuss based on blood work and pull all that out and look at that. So I really wouldn't have a number for the past year as to how many that would be. Because it would also depend on how many, the capacity we had at that time or that day, the next day, and so on.
Is it by design that length of stay is not?
Yes,
not
yeah,
one of the criteria.
exactly. If they are just loving life and living their best life and they've been here a year, and we haven't had any problems and they don't have any health problems, then they're going to be here until we find a home for them. We're talking about health, behavior and things like that, because generally that will help us manage the population and our capacity just fine.
So going forward, if we implement some of these things, are we going to be able to track this so that we can,
Absolutely.
so we'll know every day what our capacity number was, and then every day how many had to be and that was where we were at, so that going forward, we could say it's working or it's not working, and we have that information.
Absolutely, and we'll be working on more rigid documentation, both digitally and externally, so that when we have these conversations, it's not just anecdotal, like, oh, we talked for 5 minutes. This is something we'll have some in our records, so we can go back and look and say, this is what we were talking about. And especially when we come back to you and talk about it's working or not, we have some really good metrics.
Does the group vote still apply under these conditions? I know that used to be that the vet tech and the shelter manager and a few people, there was some kind of vote about.
It will be a group discussion. I wouldn't say so much a vote, because these will be the protocols we have in place. So we're not going to have someone who's going to be able to change their mind or veto or go back and forth, because then it wouldn't be fair to them to make those choices on. But it's going to be a group discussion, and not just myself walking through the shelter with a checklist. I'm going to bring my entire leadership team, and we're going to make discussions of, hey, this is the animal we're talking about. This is what we were seeing, the health concern. We'll have a vet tech involved. We'll also have a shelter supervisor involved. So we'll also be doing assessing behavior, talking with volunteers and staff to see if they've noticed anything or seen any changes as well.
That's kind of what I was asking, I guess, is that would there be buy-in from
Exactly.
yes, from your staff,
Yes.
at least?
Oh, did I do something?
I think you actually, no, yeah,
Sorry.
you hit it and moved it forward unintentionally.
Where does, I'm not necessarily talking about any particular instances, but where in these criteria would say a bite to a volunteer count? Because is it one, is it multiple? Because we've had dogs that have, you know, Kyber? Kyber probably bit at least 3 people, and some twice. And a volunteer worked with him over time. He got better, he got adopted. And then there's others, you know, that might have bit once or twice and it didn't make it. So is there is it one bite out? Is it 2? Does it matter on the severity? Does it?
That's a good question, and that's actually something we're going to discuss in here, and we're going to give you a little bit more detail as far as some updates on that.
It's not specifically detailed in here. It would be covered under the fear and anxiety and stress. But as I'm going to cover later, we need to have a conversation specifically around that, and to determine if we need a policy on bites specifically. So not specific in here yet. It could be a future conversation to add them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if you're wanting to add that as an option, we can discuss that as well to add it now. That's.
Do you have specific thoughts? Well, the only specific thoughts I have are not specific, as if you could have a dog bite somebody and never again and then be perfectly fine. And you could have a dog bite 3 or 4 times and still turn out to be okay. Or you could have a dog bite 1 time and then a year later they bite somebody again. So
I'm saying, I don't know what the answer is,
Okay.
because we don't know. I don't know what their triggers are. Nobody really knows, because we don't know where they've been in their life before. Yeah, so I'm just throwing it out there, as how do we decide?
Then I think that will be a future conversation that we're going to have and bring back to y'all to talk about and potentially have options of what a policy could be to address that specifically. That would be outside of capacity, it would just be on, I mean, we could be at half full, but that we would still address that policy on a case by case basis.
'Cause I know, having been a dog walker for a long time, and we used to take the dogs from the inside rather than the outside, even though it can still happen taking it from the outside, but when the stress level gets high with dogs, and you're walking by kennels of other dogs, and everybody's all ramped up, and they really want to kind of get at this other dog, well, your leg happens to be closer than that other dog, and they're just redirecting because they're stressed and because there's anxiety. So I think there's got to be some allowance for that kind of thing, you know?
And we will have that, yeah,
Yeah.
that will be probably next week.
I was gonna add to that, I had a question around behavior, but I think you've answered some of it with future, addressing it at future board meetings. And I'm looking at one of the pages here, and my question is kind of around, and the behavioralist. And I guess I'll kind of table that question until we get to this at future board meetings, but rather make a recommendation, which I'm sure you've already thought of, is that as you outline a policy, I would certainly suggest you include whoever this individual is in helping you map that policy, especially if you're bringing him or her in to already do evaluations and already work with the animals with behavior problems. That would, to me, be a stakeholder you would want to utilize for some kind of guidelines, to your point of, this is what I see being triggered, or this is what's working or what's not working. So just to throw that out there for as you work through this, because I would hope that individual is bringing something to the table and they're already worked with you guys.
You have a question?
No, I want to keep going back to capacity. How we can help with that. One of our previous discussions, we talked about the ability to transfer animals within the state to shelters and other agencies are looking for animals to. So, tell me a little bit about how that really exists. What's our future ability to move animals out of the.
Well, I couldn't really tell you what our future would be. But a lot of those relationships with many rescue entities outside of this. Usually it's going to have to be outside of the state of Texas. Usually a couple of states north, northeast, or west of that area. During the likelihood of that during the spring and summer months, it's very low. Because during those times, most states and most shelters where you would be transferring animals do not have they have a surplus as well. It's usually in the winter months because up north they don't have a overpopulation problem when winter hits, because winter takes care of it. So it's usually during the October through January we're able to transfer. So, and naturally we would be doing all of those things, and we're developing even more relationships, and also looking into how to transport them, and working with other entities and different organizations and different shelters to partner with them so that we can all kind of work together and utilize the same transportation, fill the empty spaces that they aren't able to fill, out to other places that are already currently transporting, and see if we can add our animals to them.
So do we have is there a quantity left? We could take one animal per month, or we could take 3 animals per month, or is it all just ambiguous based on their capability at the time of your call?
It's based on their capability at the time of their call, because keep in mind, we won't be the only one calling. The entire state of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, everything in the South will be calling them as well. And so even if we can say, hey, can you take 10 other places have asked them to take 10. They already have working agreements with them, then they already have something that's a little bit more regular. They already have like RPM. They already have places in Foster's, and they're already set, so they know they're able to communicate that better. We will be working to develop relationships where we can utilize both the existing and set up some of our own transports.
You might be getting to this with this update slide, but when you started this, I was gonna ask, what is the capacity at right now? Today?
Yes, I wrote that down. We have 4 cats and 47 dogs.
So I'm not, without going back, is that 90%, 80%, 100%?
Let's say with dogs.
47 dogs? Is that what you said?
47, yeah, so we're not at 100. Well, so now we're talking number of dogs, not enclosures.
Right. Yes, you're talking 47 dogs.
Yes.
Okay. And 4 cats.
We've
Not
exceeded our
enclosures, actual
enclosures.
enclosures. Okay.
We've exceeded our enclosures.
Right,
by-
I found that slide and I was gonna ask, so you've exceeded your enclosures?
Yes,
Okay.
by about 7 already. Any other questions?
So what we need y'all to do is take a vote to determine if y'all are in favor with implementing this threshold of capacity and triggers for the different changes to maintain capacity. Right now.
Do I hear a motion to accept?
So if there's no motion to accept, what changes would you want to see to be in favor of? Okay. Okay, so y'all would like to vote at the April meeting?
I think that would be fine.
Yeah.
Okay, because we are coming into where we're
Yeah.
heading and we're going to need to have something to rely on to make decisions. Oh, it's an agenda item.
So do you need a motion?
So they don't need a motion. It's just, it should,
They need a motion
They need a
and they need to vote as well.
Okay.
Okay.
So what motion do you need? You need a motion to accept I say bylaws. A motion to put this to a vote?
correct.
Okay, I'm trying to remember my Robert's Rules of Order here.
You need a motion to approve.
Right, okay, and then the motion will be,
Or reject.
okay.
It's an action item on the agenda, so a vote, you have to take a vote. So someone needs to motion for a vote on this, and then we need to take a vote.
And if we want to think about it, the thing to do would be to vote against it.
You could vote against it and you can vote in favor of it. It would be.
Or-
it's up to you.
I'll make the motion to accept these. So I move that these get accepted and put it to a vote. If I'm remembering correctly, if the motion isn't seconded, it will
Correct.
just fall flat, right?
That's my understanding too. Yes,
So
correct.
I've made the
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
not saying it correctly, but I make a motion or I move to put these recommendations to a vote before the board. Or approve them.
Already.
Right, okay,
Then we need a second.
yes.
Do I hear a second?
To you. I don't know.
No, so you can put a motion to approve it, put a motion to, reject it.
Okay.
if they're not with it, they can motion to reject it.
Can't you also amend the motion to create it?
Is that-
I just made the motion. There's a lot of things you could do with the motion.
You make the motion.
I'm like, I can't make a motion.
That-
Make a motion to table it till next meeting.
We have a motion to table it for the next meeting. And I second that motion. All in favor?
Who was the motion?
Who was the motion by?
To table this
Robin?
subject until-
You table it till the next meeting. All opposed? Motion passes. Now we will move on to item number 4, workshop item A.
Okay.
Review of and discussion of animal shelter update. Turn it over to Mr. Smith.
Okay, we discussed our current shelter population, 47 dogs. That's our current events that we have going on. Last month, we attended all the yappy hours at the park, which we had some adoptions at. We were successful, and it's mostly about visibility. We are also currently going to PetSmart. Not having cats there at all times, but we're also bringing our dogs out to events every weekend at PetSmart, as well as once a month to Wolfgang Bakery. And we're looking to expand that out to other events as well throughout the week and through the weekend. For our TNR pilot program at First Colony Mall, we have been unable to make contact with current colony caretaker. So we've kind of reached out to them to see they still have the same need to participate or to move this along. We will need to identify partners to collaborate with. I have been kind of in talks with other shelters that have veterinarians and other places that assist with TNR programs to see if we could also provide our pilot people with their services as well for the TNR program.
Do we have any idea of the size of the population that exists there?
We do not at this time because we don't have eyes on the population. We'll see a lot of them, but not the summer. It's usually where we get most of our.
And my second question is there a stable dollar amount that we pay for spay or neuter, or does that change based on who does it?
That would change based on the test. And who we would human resources, risk management. We are currently talking to risk management about the number of bites that we've had at the shelter, how to mitigate those particular things, as well as discussing what we're going to be doing in the future in regards to dog bites and those policies. Sugarland 101 shelter tour was last week, and we took a tour of the shelter so that people could see exactly what it looks like, how it works there, kind of give a little overview of what it was. It was really fun. We got some koozies and some information on becoming a foster or volunteer that all of them could take back with them to share with any of their social groups or professional groups as well. Toys. We have gone through all of the current toys that we have and have been able to take out all the ones that were unsafe for animals and have separated them based upon the size and the type for the animals, which are all the soft ones, small, medium, and large. And we have those kind of set out. The main thing that we're going to be kind of putting out some instructions on is trying not to leave them in the enclosure unattended, because sometimes some of them have the squeakers in them, which dogs really love. We don't want them to ingest those or to ingest too much of the filling or anything like that. But we do encourage the use of the toys. It's just if you do want to leave it in the kennels or anything like that, I ask my staff and volunteers or anyone to just let us know that they're doing it. or just to ask us about it, just in case we have information on whether they're destructive with those or not. And so that we can also keep an eye on them to make sure that they haven't made their way to the squeaker, the toy, or the apple taken away. We also use, I'm sorry, go ahead.
How are we on toys? Do we have enough?
We
This
all,
is something I used to get donations of, like cases of tennis balls for the shelters.
we always need toys, not so much tennis balls, because we can't leave them unattended at home. Tennis balls, because they're smaller those. But stuffed toys, really big chew toys that are very strong, thicker rope toys and things like that. We always take as many as we can because they get dirty and disgusting very quickly, and we don't wash those. We just toss those and give them a fresh one. Kind of finishing the toys that we have. We don't get very many small dogs, so I would encourage them to be for large dogs mostly. The small dogs tend to move very quickly, and we have plenty of little tiny toys like that. It's better to have something really that they can't swallow or they can fit in their mouth. Oh, the big, yeah.
The orange or green. They last. They last.
Are they on our wish list? So if I look at the wish list, are there any?
Probably not right now. They can be. I just have to find them on Amazon. Amazon has everything.
Speaking of the wish list, on Slack, Beth just posted, one of the dog walkers just posted that she saw on Facebook, there was a mention of a wish list. So she requested the wish list, which Kate posted there. But I didn't know we had a wish list. Plus, I'm not even on Facebook. So how do people know what the wish list is if we don't know there's one or we're not on Facebook?
That's a good point.
I did not know that the shelter had a wish list.
Yes, we're actually, but that's a good lead into the, that's a couple.
Okay.
But yes, gives me something to talk about. The happy hour for the volunteers is going to be in late April. We're going to be planning that, pushing out more messaging as to what that's going to be. So be looking for that information soon. New official shelter communication platform will be launched in the next 1 or 2 months. We're still talking about what that's going to look like and how we're going to send it out. It will be city-owned and moderated. And we're also going to be doing a monthly newsletter to active volunteers as well, to increase the level of communication that we have about the policies, procedures, special animals that we're looking for, to highlight our volunteers, and also things like the wish list and stuff like that to kind of pass them on. And we'll be looking for a way to give that to you either in paper form or something like that, so that you're able to get that information and take suggestions on different topics that we have as well.
And our wish list is on the Petopia website as well.
Okay.
I did not know that. So,
Not the Facebook.
so it is on Facebook, but
on
any,
the regular
it would
website.
also be on the Petopia website as well.
Are you guys, I'll say allow for, the electronic newsletter's good and paper and Facebook and all those platforms, but can you do anything like the city does in other areas with sending out text? Like if I'm a foster and I sign up to foster, I sign up to volunteer, you can shoot out a text message to anybody that opts in that says, come join us at Yappy Hour or come to the event at the park. I love getting those. That's the easiest way before I even check my email. And the city
Seems
does
like
that
text
for
is
weather alerts and everything else.
So
Trash changes, everything.
that's a separate platform and it's only used for specific purposes.
Okay. that's what I
But
thought.
they are launching, or they're piloting another text program that could be used, like, for example, solid waste stuff that's not service level changes, but
Right.
just like reminders.
Mhm.
So it could be something that we can tag onto. It's
Yeah.
not fully being pushed out across the city yet, but it's coming. I'm
Okay.
hoping it's gonna come in the next month or two, and that's a conversation that we could have, to have that ability. You text this number and then you receive any updates or events that we want to
Right.
promote.
And those are so easy to opt out of. You just
Yeah.
hit end or stop and you don't get them anymore.
Yeah.
And I you know, that you mentioned that, because currently now, you guys know that the alerts they send out are mainly emergency type or
Correct.
service changes or whatever. So,
Yeah.
but it's good to hear that there might be that opportunity down the road. Because that's at everybody's fingertips. So.
And also, if you are currently a volunteer in the software that they use, Better Impact, you can go to your profile and opt in for text messaging.
Oh,
We sent
okay.
out an email requesting that people opt into that, because
Oh,
if they
great.
do, we're able to send out text messaging directly to them for updates and things like that.
Okay.
We would like for all the volunteers to start to kind of opt into that. That way we can send out immediate communications that are real time as well. Staffing updates. Staffing updates, we have promoted Kate Hartsfield to the animal shelter supervisor position. That was effective this week, and she will be working with me on just managing the shelter, getting it running. She'll also be working with rescues and different things. We're going to get together and kind of see where we can make some improvements and the things that we're doing as well. That will leave an opening for the veterinary technician position, which is currently posted now. We do have one applicant, and once that position closes today, then we will be moving forward with any decisions we need to make on that particular applicant as well. Questions? Okay.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
We will now move on to top item number 5, the director's report. Item A.
Yeah, for me.
Review of and discussion of animal shelter procedures, operations, and service levels. Mr. Speck.
Talk about some service levels, our base service levels. Board plays an important part in establishing the city service levels by giving feedback and official recommendations. As the city progresses, the needs of the community will change, and it is important to constantly review services. So we're going to talk about a few of those. Use of donation funds. Donations are used for items and services that are above and beyond the base service level provided by the city. Heartworm treatment. Currently provided in an effort to make the animals more adoptable. It's been found that animals that require heartworm treatment that is provided by the owner are less adoptable. So currently we do provide that. The cost average is about $600 per animal. A drastic increase recently in the positive cases coming into the shelter. Texas is an endemic state where heartworm positives are prevalent. It's prevalent in most of the southern areas as well. Should treatment only be funded out of donation dollars? Lack of donations results in inability to provide treatment. And I guess that's a question I'd be free to discuss now.
So the question would be,
Should
does the
treatments?
city not want to pay for it or not have the funds? It's not in the budget? Or are we asking?
Well, we have donation dollars, and then we can also request donation dollars from the public as well to help fund these things, but we can't just directly go, give us money for anything. But also, should treatments be funded out of donation dollars so that that money that's averaging for those heartworm treatments go to everything?
So do you have just for clarification, is there an existing fund right now that's just donation dollars?
So any donation received by the city is put into a fund, and it's held until we say we need X number of dollars to pay for XYZ. So it doesn't just get put into the operations and maintenance budget to just spend as we please.
You have to request it.
Yes, because so there's two different types of donations as well. There's the capital donations that are specifically that were created for the new shelter, and then there's the general donation dollars, which can, and that's the pool that we can request to use funding for a new play yard, a fence, and that type of thing. So historically, heartworm treatments are being paid out of
Budget.
an O&M budget. So as we're seeing the cost is 600 per animal, we're seeing an increase in number of dogs coming in that require this treatment. And then you're also factoring in the capacity, and that becomes a level potentially of untreated and treated. And that puts a strain on the budget, right? So if we're going to continue to fund and treat heartworm positive cases, do we need to look at, should we be looking at using donation dollars, or should that be a level of service that the city provides that then just puts, it's just a further
So it's
strain?
gonna be an either or, donation, or we have a budget, or.
I mean, not necessarily, but if we're seeing a consistent increase in what's coming in, if 20 dogs come in at $600 a pop,
It's $12,000.
that's $12,000. That's not something, like, our budget doesn't have the wiggle room to say, oh yeah, we're just gonna take 12,000 from, and like, it's coming from somewhere.
But we
We
can do it as an either or though. It's not like, okay, we're only going to fund our treatments through donations, period, and then if we don't have any money, then. Or can we have the option of doing both?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, it could, and if we're following along with all the increased level of service and costs that are seen, I'm expecting $600 to start to trickle up.
That's gonna go up.
Yeah.
All roads are
Skyrocketing.
astronomical.
Yeah, we're
And
having,
that one especially
Sorry,
yeah.
is a rough one.
Goes on back order a lot.
So it could be historically, we have been paying it in the next few months as we're already seeing and preparing for fiscal year 23. And we're already being told about increase in just veterinary costs, veterinary that we have to provide to something. If we don't have the budget, something's going to get cut. And heartworm treatment is an easy one because it's going to be so significant. Does it then flip and say we're using donation dollars for heartworm treatment and not city funds to continue to provide the treatment?
Donation dollars that we're talking about specific for shelter operations.
It's just for the animal shelter. It's not, it can't be used for any department, just,
So that's segregated, and it's used for something.
correct. It can be used for the animal shelter, yes.
What is it used for primarily?
Primarily, we have used it for improvements at the shelter.
Industrial. Major significant improvements to the shelter, like some of the outdoor kennel runs and some of that infrastructure. was put in. I'm sorry?
Not all
No,
capital items.
donation, the general donations, the capital donation account is specifically for the new shelter.
So we define capital differently. So the city defines capital as being like, it's a facility, it's a structure. It's not a
But
place.
more kennels versus treatment.
Yes.
So are there types of medical treatment that have now been funded out of shelter donation?
Right now, we have not used shelter donation funds to fund treatments.
Not recently, we've been absorbing all of our recent costs within our minimum operating budget.
Is there a review of actual to plan budget? I mean, I think I'm assuming there has to be that somewhere. And then are we allowed to see? It seems to me that if we saw dollar values, and I don't even know how much is in the donation fund anymore, but it seems we're being asked to make decisions here, kind of blind to the dollars. And I would say, me personally, if the money is there, I would probably be inclined to make that happen, whether it comes out of donation dollars or what. But I'd like to see I don't know, if I'm a numbers person and I feel blind.
It would be
Yeah,
The
hard to
typical dollar
decide.
amount and then what's brought in each year, what the typical cost would be.
So
For
in my,
treatments.
yeah, so in my notes, I can go back to 2013 at least and see the number of animals that we had every month. Every month that we had this board meeting, I have all that stuff saved. And I can look at, historically what we did and kind of compare, okay, when you report numbers that we have today, is that different than it was in that season in years past? And so I kind of feel trends rather than looking at immediate numbers that are before us. But certainly there are times when those immediate numbers require action and everything. We all know, you go to the grocery store right now, it's different. It's a whole lot more than it used to be. So everything seems to be increasing. And I think we all probably know that and would be okay with acting, but I feel like I don't have, I don't know, maybe it's the numbers, but I feel like I don't have what I need to quite understand how I would even, you're asking me to approve the donation funds for heartworm. And I don't know how much is in there. I don't know. I'm,
Already been picked up by the city budget and proceed by saying, well, spend the donation funds for that. Are we cutting ourselves off from funding that we otherwise spend?
that's a good point. Where is the, when we get to June or July and we're in the throes of kittens and season, is there going to come some other more important spend for those funds? I don't know. Again, I just don't even know what amount. I used to see that, but I don't see anymore what our dollar value is.
So you're asking for the balance to our donation?
Pardon me?
You're asking for the balance of our donation account? I just want to make sure we're bringing forward the information that you want. For the next.
Well, if we're going to spend it out of there, is it a static amount right now that we're going to spend 600 per animal out of? When does that end? I mean, it could be that it would cover 5 animals or 500. I don't know what our, so.
It's not a static amount. I mean, it's always fluctuating depending on who donates, how much they donate, what we spend against it. So it's a constantly moving balance.
On average, what is our monthly donation? I'm trying to figure out
That,
whether the
that
incoming donations are going to cover the
there's really
the number
no
of
way for us
animals
to
that require heartworm treatment per month.
I mean, we can definitely get that information.
But if there's none, are you saying that, Barbara, that you also want to see the budget? And I don't.
Yeah, no, yeah,
No,
that's
I'm
not the board's role is the budget,
Right.
but donations, what we utilize those donation funds is
Okay.
part of the recommendations that the board provides for the,
Yeah,
for the policy.
I'm just saying that I'm sure they as a team, review budget and progress, actual budget and can say, this is going to, they are saying this is going to exceed our budgeted amount for this. But I don't know how much is there. So, and I don't know how much comes in. So I'm having a hard time saying, yes, I would vote to use those funds to cover every heartworm treatment that would be required for the upcoming year, not knowing whether the monthly donation that comes in would be enough to cover that, or,
Yes,
something.
not
I need
draw it
more
down to zero.
information.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that we can bring.
I only have a problem with the word only.
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, I'm fine with donation dollars being used for it, but only makes it sound like once the donation dollars are gone, we have dogs come in with heartworm, they can't get treated because that says only, so we can't use budgeted. Am I reading that right?
Well, but budget is such, hey, when times get tough, decisions get tougher. And so if other budgeted items all increase, something has to give, you know, you can't set a budget and then expect to not be affected by inflation that is happening in different areas. So I'm okay with if they say, you know, something has changed here. We used to be able to do that, but we're no longer able to do it. And this is going to have to come from somewhere else. I'm okay with, you know, I think we should be reacting to things that change and potentially using the fundraise money in the best appropriate way. But I'm just saying this, I can't see if we have enough, if we say only, so should heartworm treatment only come from donation dollars, then does that mean, what if we don't have enough for the animals for a year? Are we then voting to not do heartworm treatment for heartworm positive dogs that we find? So then they're being added to our triage or.
And so we can come back.
It
Yeah.
says should treatment only be funded.
Yeah.
Oh, it does say only.
So my
Yeah,
question
but
for
that's
Dr.
what, when I asked them, it's either or, they said it could be both. So I mean, maybe the only should be there. Should treatment be allowed out of donation dollars might be the better way to put it. And then if we are allowing us to use that on periodic basis when need be, then yeah, sure, go ahead and take the $600 out, but don't make it an only situation. Just as needed, you know, then treatment be as needed, taken out of.
So my question,
donation.
So that can be, I mean, we'll come back and bring numbers so you can see historical income of donations, what the balance is, what we've used it for, what it potentially would be. If we use.
I'm not
donations to
asking
have
for
that.
a big audit type thing or
Oh, no,
anything
no,
like
no.
that.
It's
You know,
just
I'm
showing
just
you
trying
what
to
that
see
figure is.
whether this particular one, do we have enough to, if we vote and say, we're only going to do heartworm treatment out
How
of
does
these
that impact?
donated dollars? Yes.
Yeah.
What, and then the other thing is, I guess, what else are we going to need fundraised dollars for? Because as everything increases, maybe what we have fundraised up till now isn't enough. And, you know, we've talked about fundraising for different wants, but it seems like maybe there's going to be fundraising required for needs. And if we are, so then maybe there's some other action that's going to have to come along with that vote. You know, if there's not enough to cover all the heartworm, then do we need more fundraising of some kind? That's the kind of thing, the questions that are going through.
How about grant requests? Has anybody issued grant requests for granting the medical treatment? Because
I
I
don't
am
know if we've
on
ever done
several
anything.
boards for human issues. And we have huge grant requests that have been covered for individual medical treatment.
That is another thing that we've discussed internally before, but as we mentioned in the last, in Dr. Cruz's presentation, we don't have staff dedicated to do that. So that's the struggle that we face with those additional items like requesting grants, because someone has to be there to write the grant. And then someone has to be there to be providing the documentation following receiving the grant. So it's a process throughout the use of the funds. And that's also somewhere where we struggle to have staff capacity to do that. And so it's something that we're looking at. But right now, we don't have anyone on staff to do it.
Not at one time have a committee that's supposed to be funding, raising all this money community-wide that's supposed to help us. Has that been the foundation? Yeah. The foundation. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, the Legacy Foundation was strictly
What
for
do they do?
So that, from my understanding, that was strictly for the new shelter, and I don't have any update on what they aren't doing.
Are they existing?
The Legacy Foundation, yes,
And what do they?
yes,
do?
they,
Because they're supposed to help a lot of us who are on board.
I think so there were several
We
people I
got this
know.
money. I mean, really.
I know that there were several people who could offer to help write grants, but there's still that managing it, collecting the data, recording, because you don't get a grant without having to report back, of course.
But we have to, I've been on this board for 4 years and we're still not collecting data. I mean, we don't have the capability of writing grants. That's sad. I mean, that's sad. It's kind of like I approached the staff today about, there's supposed to be a liaison for every HOA. My HOA has never seen a liaison. So unless you put it in the newsletter or on the website, how do you expect to get donations? They don't even know what we exist or what we need. So the Legacy Foundation is fine. Well, okay.
Well, it seems to me that it would require some legwork to see if there is a donation, a grant available that would pay for that kind of thing. And then would it be, somebody would have to say, would it be worthwhile? You know, I'm sure if the dollar value is large enough to warrant people doing it, then somebody would, I don't know, then maybe they're willing to do it, but I don't know of any grants available. I'm willing to look for grants and see if there's any for medical stuff as just kind of a separate line. And then report back, you know.
Nicole, are you saying there's not a staff person for the entire city that's dedicated to grants, or are you talking specifically for the shelter related?
My understanding is there's one individual who also works on a lot of our EOC and emergency management documentation. So that.
yeah, each department or division, if there's grants for, on their specialty, they're the grant writers who would write it. And then they would utilize, if we received it, they would utilize that person who helps track, coordinate for the entire city. So yeah, specifically internally, like we would do our own, or have to do our own grant writing.
You said we, mean the Department of
Correct.
Environmental.
Yes.
How many heartworm positive dogs do we have a month? In the time you've been here? And if we know in the last
It's
year.
very hard to
how
say
many have-
per month because, I mean, we have them here. Right now, we've treated 10. Some of them are long-stay residents, and we have 5 that are currently untreated right now because they're, when I say untreated, there's a 30-day period where they have to take an antibiotic. So the treatment, just see the veterinarian for the injections, is when we said they've officially been treated. And we have 5 currently that have not, as of now. We have 10 that have in at least the past year. So out of those 10, $600,000.
How much?
$6,000 a piece.
Yeah, I was about to say that if you're sticking to the.
If we're just sticking to that average.
Yeah.
It could be more depending on if they have to stay longer, stay overnight, if they have to receive any other supplemental drugs or anything like that. Any other questions?
Do we know the ballpark, how much is in the fund, the donation fund?
I would want to see, just carried over funds from the previous fiscal year, so I would want to speak. We can provide that information at the next meeting.
Or ahead of the next, we get to you ahead of the meeting, so you can have a chance to look at it.
Because the amount, I'm glad, I was about to ask, I'm glad you asked the number of dogs under heartworm treatment, because I think that's equally important. Somebody, one of you back here had mentioned that, the fund today, whatever it has in there, May, June, July, that could change drastically. Like you said, if the donations are up or down, or you're borrowing against it. While that number is important to know, you know, we might see here in the next month, charitable contributions across the board go down as everything else in our lives go up. So I think it's a good, for me, it's a good starting point, but I think several other people had mentioned, I would be more interested in the wording being changed and then say, yeah, go ahead and use the fund, knowing that if, okay, today it's this much and we had this many animals over the last year. So it's, and if the trend of donations were to continue plus or minus a percentage, then we should be good. But to predict that today it has $10,000, so in June it's going to have $20,000, I'm not comfortable doing that. But your management of it, if it can support what's there now with the trend of approximately this much gains and losses versus this animals, that works for me.
Don't forget that we have some city funds outside.
Right, right. No, I'm just speaking to the donation. I'm just speaking to the donation. Yeah. Just because of when they mentioned earlier, the nature of the donations, it's hard to predict, especially current day, that somebody who's been donating $100 a month, they may say, wow, I can only do 10 now. So to try to look at that and accurately guess, I just think there needs to be a margin of error to be considered.
And there's 5 that are currently need it. and don't.
And they will be receiving it. Let's see. They just have not gotten it. Anything else? No? Rescue transportation. Some transportation is free while others are done for a fee per animal. Right now, we use RPM extensively in fiscal year 2022 at $100 per animal transferred. And we have been close to $7,000 since October for transport of animals. Expanded partnerships will also come at a cost as we look at transporting further or transporting on our own, using our own transportation, or paying a fee to go with other rescues as well. And then should this cost be covered out of the funds?
So again, we'll have to bring that fund balance and all that to y'all to have a further discussion on it.
Yeah. Do you expect that if Sugarland created their own transport or found their own transport partner or something, that it would be less than the 100, or are we thinking that? So I'm just trying to ballpark in my head the amount of money.
The amount of money is probably going to stay approximately the same. It may be a little cheaper because we have our own items, but we would have to procure those particular things. A lot of that is the cost for gas, paying room board for the person driving, or sometimes they offer for flights. There are certain 501c3s that will donate the plane, but it's $100. The average cost is about $100 per animal. Like 75 animals on there, fly them somewhere. So it is right now the industry standard is about the average at cost is about. So we would, we were to do that, yes, we would probably see it a little bit cheaper because we could either have volunteers that drive, or we have our own vehicle or our own transportation that we're no longer having. And then there may be some where we don't cost per animal.
And a ballpark, how many, so we're saying currently to date, we've spent $7,000, and any rough goal, like for a whole year? So
Yeah, that's about a third of our year, so if you did it on an annualized basis.
And this is during not peak season
Yeah,
too,
yeah,
so depending on capacity, obviously, we're gonna be pushing to transfer as many out to maintain capacity. So
Yeah, so your 21 is gonna be the right side.
Looking at the number, we're gonna try to send as many as we can to rescue, because the expectation is they're going to reach our capacity or exceed it. So instead of waiting for that to happen, bring out as we can to rescues. And if we have somebody established on our own, definitely be some ways to find them all. So we can make room for the rescues that come in.
Don, did that include the emptying of Whiskerville?
Yes.
So that might have been a little, or did the majority of those go to SPCA or did they go to RPM?
Well, the majority of those went to RPM. RPM has done several since then with us. And we sent a lot of our dogs with them as well. And most of those were just clearing out Whiskerville as well. The anticipation is we would clear out Whiskerville next year because we will have Whiskerville. But if we have our capacity starts to exceed and we're able to transfer out 10 or 15 cats, knowing that we're going to have 10 or at least 10 or 15 more coming in, it's going to prevent us having to make those occupational decisions.
If we do the TNR, will there not also be potential donation funds that need to be used there for things as well? So then that's another pool of. Do we have other hopes or needs that that we're thinking need to come out of the fund?
Well, we're always looking at expanding our enrichment and exercise areas. So, play yards for the animals. It's something that we'll also be looking at to use for donations. Just adding on more things for the animals, for the cats, making improvements play with. Also, we'll have a nursery for now. It's probably starting next month all the way through July, August. So that is going to be an additional expense to try to get that up and running and save as many of those.
So Dawn, I'm correct, right? When we put money into that donation fund, they're not really, people are not specifying that it has to be for any particular use. So in some kind, like the capital fund, people are saying what that money can be used for, but in the donation fund, it can be used for. Correct, yes.
Questions? Microchipping. Currently only mandatory for repeat offenders. We say repeat offenders, animals that come in, that are lost, or keep getting out. Now, we require that they be microchipped, but we offer it to all returned animals. So at this juncture, any animal that is returned to owner, we strongly offer and suggest that they microchip their animal. And we do that for them because it saves the city money and man hours in trying to return them. And if they don't come looking for them, or don't think to come to the shelter, or they got so far away they didn't think that they would make it here, so they're looking elsewhere, then we have another animal that comes astray, that then becomes our own animal, and that becomes another resource and another enclosure, another cage that we have to take up where we can return them back. Especially if we have the microchip. The microchip is automatically registered to the owner. They don't have to do anything but give us their information, and it's automatically registered in our system. So that way we can immediately call them. They can update their information at any time for free. It's the best way that we can return an animal to our home. Animal Services has done a few microchipping events in collaboration with community organizations. We'd like to continue to do that. It's not a service typically available to the average pet owner. The questions are, should it be something that we offer to the average pet owner at a price? And should there be an ordinance change to make it mandatory? In the city of Houston, they have moved away from rabies tags, which have to be renewed every year, and have to provide proof of rabies and things like that, to using microchips as their mandatory registration, because that's a lifetime thing. It is, goes with the animal, and you don't have to do a search for a rabies tag from a previous clinic that may or may not have records for that particular animal. It has to be updated every year. Many of us who have pets or have seen pets on the loose have seen rabies tags on there from 2012, 2013, 2014, and who knows when's the last time they had the rabies vaccine done. But a microchip is for life. At least we're able to trace that back at least to the original owner, even if they transfer ownership, which is still something helpful. So that's something to also be thinking about. If the ordinance change would be something that would work for the city of Sugarland. And even offering it to the Sugarland residents who can provide proof that they are Sugarland resident, that we offer microchipping, just best practice.
Right, what does it cost us to microchip? I mean, how much does it cost? I know we're at Pet Watch now, so I have.
24-hour pet watch, it can be anywhere between $5 to $10 per chip.
Well, I think it should be a service that we provide, but I don't think it should be.
Voluntarily choose to offer the service. That's what
No. Any other questions, comments?
How much is the cost from the vet for a microchip right now?
Anywhere from $50 to $100.
I like this.
Feel like the revenue generated, yeah.
No, but
Oh.
not that. I just think that when you describe, when I look at next door, and I see all the people looking for animals and all the, all the back and forth and work that it takes to, and all the communication. And they're always talking about if, take it to a vet, and very often that animal doesn't have it. And it would be an easy solution if it did.
Animal remains. Currently, animal control does pick up for deceased animals, both on private and public property. There are calls for pickups of deceased remains. Historically, in 2020, we had 293. In 2021, we had 275 calls for an animal control officer. We have only 4 to go out and pick up animals both on private property and on public property. Since January, we've had 43 calls. Streets are right away with 60% of those calls. No coordination is required. With private property, 40% of those calls, they're not personal pets. It can just be an online. Scheduled pickup commonly necessary to enter private property, and then remains are allowed. Do keep in mind that remains are allowed to be placed in residential solid waste sites for disposal. An animal that we've had calls where the animal has been disposed of in their garbage can. Garbage can that's on the side of the road. For garbage pickup. So, should we remove deceased animals' remains from private property? That's just a discussion to talk about as far as resources and that's something we should.
For example, this would be somebody saying, I have a dead squirrel in my backyard. Please help me. Those are the types of calls that we get. I have a squirrel in my backyard, I have a possum in my backyard, I have a raccoon in my front yard. And it's on private property. We're not talking about person.
And it's dead. It's not.
Dead or it's been dead.
They want us to come remove the remains from their private property.
Yeah, but some of these animals could have been ravenous, so it would be or the size of the animal, I wouldn't want somebody to have to live there.
And most people being comfortable. Whatever. no matter
Shovel, how big, shovel.
Because it's left in their yard, and what if their dog gets to it in the backyard and it's got some kind of.
Well, it is, it does take resources when they have any calls on actual animals at large or things like that.
Or you comfortable, Mr. Citizen, or have you something to put it in the trash can, and they go, is that okay? Then you go, yeah, it's okay. And I'm like, "Oh, but
I wouldn't want my trash smelling like that or garbage. But
Twice a week, sir.
I get.
I don't know, I feel like expecting. This one's-
Do we have resources?
We would
for
expect
animal
them to
services?
come to our yard and remove the squirrels.
We just have 4 officers in the entire system. And when we say the city of Sugarland, we mean the territory.
We don't have enough resources.
That's what I'm thinking, especially
Pun intended.
as I look, yeah. Or the priority is,
A live animal on the list takes priority over a dead animal.
or if you're operating at 150% capacity, we don't have the resources to go pick up a squirrel.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a dead issue.
I can get it.
Ah,
I agree with you. That's a dead issue.
Yeah, and we do utilize our animal service officers for cleaning as well throughout the
Yeah.
day as well. So they would have to stop cleaning,
I don't-
stop
I
taking
don't
animals,
see
stop
that-
picking them up from the vet,
That seems like a,
charging a fee.
That issue.
yeah.
That's good. That's something we can do.
If you have to consider charging.
Yeah, we got, we don't.
Still worth.
That's something to look into to determine the cost analysis. of how much.
Because if they have to call a service, call a pest control service or something.
Yeah,
to
right,
come
yeah,
remove
you-
it, there
that
would
could
be
be a
a
suggestion.
And then, and to your point, Doctor, also for any like rabies vectors, like if it's a bat. Or something like that, but if it's just a squirrel. Charging would also have the kind of.
Private services.
It's
If we're
charged.
going to do it. You want to get out there and get it done. But squirrel example like that. Or maybe even at all, depending on the use of the time. Then you gotta consider.
I think every place is now starting to fee for service, even if it's city of Sugar. And I think that should be our focus, picking up any, my opinion, I think we should consider microchipping every living thing that walks through the shelter, coming out of the donation services. I understand that. I think it's mandatory. I think it's good, and I agree with the rabies tags. I mean, some of them are so old. You know, the vets have closed. I mean, you know, it's so old. But I think if we do anything for the community, I think we should consider a fee for that service. We don't even have enough staff to do 140% capacity. And so now we're thinking of running around the city of Sugarland, picking up a possum. I
Well,
mean,
we are.
Nope. It's terrible. You want to microchip everything.
yeah, having more microchipping and less people picking up dead animals in the city of Sugarland is more possible.
But were you talking about microchipping like personal pets? Because with TNR, they're tagged differently.
No.
They're not like that.
And with the TNR, they wouldn't be coming into the shelter.
Right, right,
We
right.
would just, we
Right,
would
they're-
just be
And I'm
facilitating.
using that as. an
Right, I know you're
example.
saying that, I just was.
Yeah, it's just.
No, I agree.
I think one thing about the dead animals is the ducks, because that's a real issue. And just from where I live and where I walk, a lot of our nice greenbelt areas and lakes are near schools. And there are lots of kids that bike and walk to school, and seeing a dead duck that has been attacked by a dog or something isn't really what you want kids exposed to. Not that they're gonna touch it.
Is that on public property?
No,
or
public,
private?
that's public. So, I mean, I think that's one thing that, you might want to consider keeping. As the calls come in, you can obviously look at a map and see, but, I'm thinking like around Austin Parkway and the lakes there, that's just where I spend a lot of time, but I've called in, not to the shelter, but to the homeowners, because it's Missouri City on the other side, but they look pretty gross. And, you have kids walking home alone or biking home alone in a lot of areas of our city. And that's kind of a traumatic, gross thing to.
But that's homeowner.
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, but that's
that's
like,
public.
that's
public.
That's
Yeah,
public.
yeah, no, I'm
We're
just
not
saying
able-
it was in there
We're
somewhere
not
for
talking
public
about
good calls, but I think that we should figure out a way to keep that for the public or.
And
just for some of the
And
calls.
HOAs, keep in mind too, HOAs, so some of their reserves, and HOAs do have their own team to maintain their grounds. So, and even the HOAs will call us to request that we pick up remains from HOA privately owned reserves. So it's a struggle for us all around.
In my neighborhood, when the lawn crews come through, the city or the HOA contracted ones, I guess. When they come through, they also pick up animals that are on the street. Of course, that means that they may be there several days until the crew gets there, but they do dispose of any animals that are on the street or on the grass areas.
This discussion is not about remains that are on public.
That's what I was gonna ask.
They're
It's-
not.
We're talking about
not-
private property.
That's not what we're asking whether or not we as a city should be removing deceased remains from private.
Right,
property.
private property.
We only have 5 minutes left. You don't have anything else. That's right. Yeah.
Upcoming service level topics, wildlife, trapping of nuisance wildlife, raccoons, possums, things like that. Injured animals will still be transported to rescue veterinarians for appropriate care, hog trapping and alligator calls. And those are upcoming topics we'll talk about at later dates. General trapping of cats, cost to request a trap, or deposit, and there is not a deposit or cost, and limit on total number of requests per year. At this point, you can keep trapping in the same area and several cats, and that's right now they have to come and pick those up, but we want to talk about, is there a cost, is there a deposit? We want to trapping, trap.
Will you be coming back to us with
Yes.
a request to make a decision on those things that you mentioned that you're telling us to think about?
Yes.
Or is that something you're going to decide? We're coming back.
We're coming back, yeah, yeah.
Yes.
We're kind of talking to you about it today, marinate on it, think about it, and then we'll come back and we'll probably have some more thoughts on it with the next one.
I'm even picking up that animals.
Now we'll move on to item number 5, the director's report. I'm gonna turn it over to Dawn.
Okay, so Whisker Bill repairs. The floor is done. We had an organization who was scheduled to come in and repaint internally that canceled on us due to unforeseen circumstances. So we are painting the inside of Whiskerville this weekend, and we will move back in and have it open up next week. So exciting for that to reopen. Our animal services staff received our Employee Appreciation Day winner. So it was open throughout the entire city. The different divisions and departments could nominate either people or divisions or departments, and animal services won across the entire city. And so we had, I don't know if they told us how many, but we received several nominations. And I was going to read you a couple of the nominations that were sent in. So the animal shelter has been through a lot of changes this past year, and the staff have taken them all in stride and continue to take steps to better their operational efficiencies. The staff puts the well-being of the animals as their top priority. The shelter is restarting all the community events and is taking advantage of relationships with all the rescue organizations. Thanks to Dawn for rebuilding those. And recently the shelter had no cats up for adoption. I don't think they understood we had a project going on, but I appreciate that they were aware of what was happening out here. So our innovation department actually did do a nomination, and so they've been working with us to brainstorm ways of increasing adoptions and to make the shelter a better place. And they said it's been a true pleasure to work with them. And as you can tell, they are extremely passionate about the animals. The passion for finding the animals permanent homes is second to none. They're always trying to think of a new creative way to do this. The organization can learn from them and their creativity. So we're definitely proud to have them be the winner of that award. They did this post on social media, so if you follow us, you saw it. So they're super excited about that. And I think you'll even get lunch for
Yes,
winning the
they
award
did.
as well.
Yeah.
So that's happening this week, is that right? On
Excited
Friday?
about that.
Yeah, lunch. Free food's always nice, right? So on the review of concerns, we did get called out in a social media post regarding TNR by No Kill Sugarland. I don't know who's on social media, but so it was a post about these cat houses that a person is building to use for TNR. And I know I had never seen anything like that either. And so Nicole's like, oh, that'd be cool to use at the mall. So thanks for calling us out. Now we're going to be looking at that as a potential implementation in the mall. So just want to make you all aware of that. In some conversations that I've been having, I was made aware that we failed to introduce Dawn as the new animal services manager to the volunteer base. So we will be correcting that. Dawn's going to be starting those newsletters as well. So I think that first newsletter will be a sorry, but here, here's the new animal services manager. So everyone's aware of the change in that regard, as well as continuing to highlight any staffing changes. Like we have Kate, who's promoted. So we'll continue to do that. And then I also wanted to tag on to the bite incidents. So Dawn said we have seen an increase in the bite incidents that are happening. I've signed, I think, probably 8 in the last 2 weeks. But we did have a severe case that happened 2 weekends ago. And so we had a foster that came in on a Sunday to pick up an animal. We brought the animal out from the back. And she just opened her arms like to kind of welcome the dog. Hi, and the dog took a chunk out of her arm. We had to call EMS because it was a significant bleed. And we are going to try to nominate the staff person who was here for like a life safety award because she went immediately to work to stop the bleeding, which is definitely, she did great. And thankfully, like EMS and PD were on site, so they were able to quickly respond as well. So we are seeing some bite cases, but definitely wanted to make y'all aware of that one because it was a significant, she was transported to the hospital here locally and then transported downtown to see a specialist for her arm. So we're definitely keeping in contact with her and making sure that she's fully recovering. So not a positive situation, but definitely wanted to make you aware. Agenda topics will continue. We will start to have the regionalization conversation and shelter options next month as well. We're still working with communications and we hope to get a draft communication plan to y'all for review ahead of a board meeting, just so y'all can see it. We're continuing to grow those opportunities to market and promote the shelter. Questions? 1 minute.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I said.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.